Today we're going to explore the surprising truth about the meat you buy at the supermarket and how ancient preservation methods surpassed modern technologies. Before continuing with the video, remember to subscribe to the channel for more documentary narratives like this one. Carefully observe the bacon you purchased less than a week ago. At the edges, a grayish hue has already begun to appear. Upon opening the packaging, a peculiar odor is revealed, a sour mixture with chemical notes. By the seventh day, the surface is slimy. You discard the product. Now, consider a completely different scene, set in the year 1547. In the Austrian lands, a farmer processes a whole pig, applying salt, smoking the meat with beechwood, and suspending it in the cool depths of his cellar. 16 months pass. The following Easter Sunday, his family gathers to consume that ham. The meat not only remained safe for consumption, but developed characteristics superior to the fresh product. What knowledge did this medieval rural worker possess, armed only with rudimentary tools and firewood that our contemporary distribution chain seems to have abandoned? The answer lies in what salt, smoke, and time can achieve, things that refrigeration and plastic packaging simply cannot replicate. And there's a specific reason why the food industry prefers that you don't understand this fundamental difference. Carefully examine the ingredient list on any package of supermarket bacon. You will find water listed, not the natural moisture present in the meat, but water deliberately added. Industrial processors use equipment with multiple needles to inject saline solution directly into the muscle tissue. The term they use is enhancement, but a more accurate description would be economic adulteration. A contemporary cut of bacon can contain between 15 and 25% added water. You are paying animal protein prices for a mixture of municipal water, phosphates, and sodium chloride. When you invest $10 in a package of bacon, approximately $2 was spent solely on water. Over the course of a year, American families collectively waste $2 billion acquiring water that has been marketed as food. However, the financial issue is only the beginning of the problem. The injected water is compromising product safety. Scientists use the term water activity to quantify how much of the liquid present is available for microbial use. Pure water receives a maximum score of 0. Fresh raw meat scores approximately 0.98. Bacteria thrive in this environment. Salmonella cannot develop when the index falls below 0.95. E. coli stops its proliferation at the same level. Listeria, a microorganism responsible for 60 deaths annually in the United States, requires 0.92 or higher. Your modern bacon, saturated with lucrative water, has indices between 0.96 and 0.97. It has become a bacterial paradise wrapped in polymers. Medieval bacon, after weeks subjected to salt and smoke, reached between 0.85 and 0.88. At this level, no organism can proliferate, neither bacteria nor fungi nor yeasts. The meat becomes chemically hostile to microbial life. Refrigeration becomes unnecessary because there are no resources left for microorganisms to exploit. The situation gets even worse. The injected water isn't pure. It contains sodium phosphate, a chemical compound that causes muscle fibers to swell and retain more fluid. Observe closely when you cook processed bacon. A white foam bubbles in the pan. That's the added water escaping, carrying dissolved proteins with it. The bacon shrinks, sometimes by as much as 30%. You're not cooking genuine bacon. You're boiling meat injected in its own chemical bath. The industry has been aware of this reality since the 1950s, when mechanical injection became standard procedure. Previously, bacon was cured using the traditional method, rubbed with salt, left to rest for weeks and smoked. During this process, it lost 25% of its weight. This reduction represented a loss of profit. So the industry discovered a solution not only to stop the loss, but to add weight back to the product. They transformed a preservation method into a profit-maximizing method, and your health became the unspoken cost. But here's the aspect that should provoke genuine outrage. This moist, injected, and bacteria-receptive product is labeled natural and traditional. Some packages boast the term uncured. They use celery powder, instead of sodium nitrite and claim it's healthier and more authentic. It's a false representation. Celery powder is simply concentrated nitrate extracted from vegetables. When the bacteria present in the meat convert these nitrates into nitrites, it's exactly the same chemical molecule that your body processes. The only difference lies in the label and the price. You pay an additional $3 per pound for marketing strategy. The medieval farmer didn't inject water into his meat. He did precisely the opposite. He extracted every drop of moisture, transforming the tissue into something capable of surviving winter, military sieges, and ocean crossings. His meat was designed to last. Yours was designed to expire. Let's return to that Alpine smokehouse, because what transpired inside that wooden structure over 6 weeks wasn't primitive. It was sophisticated chemical engineering working in conjunction with the physical laws of preservation. The process began on the day the pig was slaughtered. The farmer would cut the meat into large portions, hams, bellies, shoulders. Within hours, while the tissue still retained heat, he would completely encase it in pure coarse salt, pressing it into every exposed surface. The goal wasn't flavor, but chemical warfare. Salt acts like a weapon. When you wrap meat in salt, osmosis begins immediately. The water inside the muscle cells is drawn toward the salt crystals on the surface. The cells contract. The escaping liquid carries blood, bacteria, and nutrients that the microorganisms need to survive. Over the next 7 days, the meat would lose 15% of its weight. All of that volume was water draining into the salt bed below. But here's the genius. Medieval people didn't just apply salt once. After a week, they scraped off the damp, bloody salt, applying fresh, dry salt. Then they repeated the process. By the third application of salt, the meat was firm, dark red, and dry to the touch. If you measured the water activity at this point, it would be around 0.92, low enough to stop most bacteria, but not low enough for complete safety assurance. That's where the smoke came in. The smokehouse was a stone or wooden structure with a fire pit separated from the meat by a long underground duct or channel. The smoke that reached the suspended meat was cold, below 30 degrees Celsius. This was crucial. Hot smoke would cook the exterior, forming a hard crust that would trap moisture inside. Cold smoke did the opposite. It dried the meat slowly while depositing an invisible army of preservative chemicals on every surface. Wood smoke contains over 200 different compounds. The most important are phenols and organic acids. Phenols come from lignin, the resistant polymer that gives wood its structure. When wood burns at low temperatures, the lignin fragments and releases chemicals such as guaiacol and syringol. These phenols are disinfectants. They penetrate the surface of the meat and eliminate bacteria on contact. They also prevent the fat from becoming rancid, which is why smoked meat doesn't develop that sour, decaying odor even after months. Organic acids, acetic acid, and propionic acid do something even more ingenious. They reduce the pH of the meat's surface to approximately 5.0. Bacteria cannot survive in an acidic environment. But here's the trick. These acids don't just stay on the surface, they are small molecules. They cross the bacterial cell wall and penetrate the interior. Once inside, where the pH is neutral, the acid molecule fragments and floods the cell with hydrogen ions. The bacteria must use all their energy trying to expel these ions. They become exhausted and die. The smoke not only coats the meat, it turns the meat into a trap. After 6 weeks, the ham was removed from the smokehouse. It was hard, almost black on the outside, and had lost 25 to 30% of its original weight. It exuded an aroma of wood and salt. The farmer wrapped it in cloth, hung it in a cool, dry cellar, and left it there. A year later, when he cut that ham, the inside was deep red, firm and secure, preserved only by salt, smoke, and time. This was not a rare practice. Monasteries in Germany kept records showing hams stored for 18 months without deterioration. Ships crossing the Atlantic in the 1600s carried barrels of salted pork that remained edible throughout the voyage, 6 months at sea without refrigeration. In 1841, a food inspector in Belfast tested hams imported from Westphalia, Germany. He reported that after 12 months in a dry cellar, they were superior in flavor and preservation to any local product. The method worked, because it respected the biology of decomposition. It didn't try to trick bacteria with chemicals. It removed what the bacteria needed to survive: water, oxygen, and a neutral pH. It was a fortress built of salt and smoke, and once that fortress was complete, the meat became untouchable. Now let's discuss why this worked at a level most people never realize: the molecular level. Bacteria need three things to grow: food, water, and the right environment. Medieval preservation attacked all three. Let's start with water. Scientists call this water activity, written as AW. It's a scale from 0 to 1. Pure water is 0. Fresh meat is 0.98. This number indicates how much of the water is free for bacterial use. When you add salt to meat, something happens that most people don't understand. The salt doesn't just sit there. It dissolves in the water inside the meat and separates into sodium and chloride ions. These ions attract water molecules and hold them in place. The water is still present, but it's no longer available. Bacteria can't access it. Think of it this way. Imagine a room full of chairs. If the chairs are empty, people can sit down. But if each chair has a coat on it, the room is full but useless. The salt ions are the coats. They occupy the water molecules. When you reduce the water activity below 0.95, you've covered enough chairs that most bacteria can't find anywhere to sit. They starve to death, but medieval bacon didn't stop at 0.95. It went down to 0.85 or less. At that point, even the most resistant bacteria, like Staphylococcus aureus, can barely function. Fungi can't even get started until you reach 0.80. The meat becomes a biological desert. Now add the smoke. When wood burns slowly, it produces not only flavor, it produces chemicals. One of the fundamental reactions is called pyrolysis. This is when heat breaks down the structure of the wood, without flames. Lignin, the compound that makes wood hard, fragments into smaller molecules. These molecules are phenols. Phenols are the same chemicals used in antiseptic mouthwashes and hospital disinfectants. When phenolic smoke touches the surface of meat, these molecules don't bounce off. They adhere. They react with the proteins on the surface and form a thin, resistant layer called a film. This film is like cling film. It traps remaining moisture and blocks oxygen and airborne bacteria. But phenols also do something inside the meat. They move through the muscle fibers and bind to fat molecules. Fat normally becomes rancid when it reacts with oxygen. Phenols block this reaction. That's why a 2-year-old ham doesn't smell of rotten fat. The smoke has neutralized the decomposition chemistry before it can begin. The third layer of defense is pH. The organic acids in smoke, primarily acetic acid, the same acid in vinegar, reduce the surface pH of the meat to approximately 5.0 or less. This matters because bacteria have a comfort zone. Most pathogens prefer a pH between 6.5 and 7.5, close to neutral. When you reduce the pH to 5.0, their enzymes stop working. Their cell membranes suffer damage. But here's the part that makes it lethal. These acid molecules are small. They pass through the bacterial cell wall. Once inside, they fragment and release hydrogen ions. The inside of the bacterial cell floods with acid. The bacterium spends all its energy trying to pump the acid out. Then it simply exhausts itself and dies. This is called the barrier effect. Each method, salt, smoke, drying, creates an obstacle. Alone, each barrier could slow down bacteria. Together, they create a wall that nothing can penetrate. Medieval meat not only resisted decomposition, it became chemically programmed to destroy anything that tried to spoil it. Your modern bacon lacks all of that. The added 15% water keeps the water activity dangerously high. The liquid smoke flavor is sprayed on for taste, not preservation. There's no film, no phenolic barrier, no pH change. The meat is tender, moist, and susceptible to bacteria. The only thing standing between your bacon and complete putrefaction is a 40-degree refrigerator and a plastic wrapper. Cut the power for 12 hours, and your $10 package becomes a biohazard. So if the old method was superior, safer, more durable, more resilient, why did we abandon it? 3 reasons: speed, cost, and the cold chain. After World War II, America needed to feed a growing population. Meat processors wanted to move product quickly. Traditional curing took 6 to 8 weeks. Dry salting, slow smoking, and careful storage were too slow for industrial scale. Then, in the 1950s, engineers invented brine injection. Instead of waiting for the salt to diffuse into the meat over weeks, they could force it in using needles in seconds. A machine with 40 needles could inject an entire ham in less than a minute. But the injection did something else. It added weight. When you inject a saltwater solution into meat, the muscle fibers swell. They hold the liquid like a sponge. A 10-pound ham could become 11 or 12 pounds overnight. The processor didn't lose 25% from drying. He gained 15% from added water. Every pound of water sold at the price of meat was pure profit. The industry loved it, and consumers didn't notice at first. The meat looked plump and fresh. It was only when you cooked it that the truth literally came out. That white liquid spilling into the pan isn't fat. It's injected water escaping, mixed with dissolved proteins and phosphates. You're watching your money evaporate. Then there's the labeling game. In the 70s, consumers began to worry about nitrites. Studies linked them to cancer when cooked at high temperatures. The industry had a problem. Nitrites prevent botulism and give bacon its pink color. Without them, bacon turns gray and becomes dangerous. So instead of removing nitrites, they found a loophole: celery powder. Celery naturally contains high levels of nitrates. When you add celery powder to meat along with a starter bacterial culture, the bacteria convert the nitrates into nitrites. It's exactly the same chemical, exactly the same effect. But because it comes from a vegetable, the USDA allows it to be labeled uncured and no added nitrates. Consumers see natural and pay $3 more per pound. The industry gets to continue using nitrites while charging a premium for hiding it. This is the modern food system. Optimize for profit, add water, exploit loopholes, market the illusion of tradition while doing the opposite. But there's a darker reason why we abandoned the old methods: the cold chain. In the 60s and 70s, refrigeration became cheap and universal. Every truck, every warehouse, every store had coolers. If you could keep meat cold from slaughter to table, you didn't need to preserve it. You could sell it moist, fresh, and profitable. Preservation became unnecessary. Except it wasn't unnecessary. It was safe. Medieval people preserved meat because they had to survive winter, survive war, survive crop failures. Their food had to last. Our food only needs to last until the next trip to the market. We traded resilience for convenience. And now, when the power goes out or the supply chain breaks down, our food spoils in days. So what can you do about it? You have 3 options. Find truly preserved meat, make it yourself, or at least learn to recognize fakes. First, find the genuine product. Look for products labeled country-style ham or dry-cured. These are closer to the medieval method. They are salted, aged, and sometimes smoked without injection. They will be tough, dark, and expensive. A real country-style ham costs $3 to $5 more per pound than supermarket ham, but it's not full of water. You're paying for meat, not for a profit margin on municipal water. Specifically check for the word dry-cured. Wet-cured means it was soaked or injected. Dry-cured means it was packed in salt and aged. If the packaging says water added anywhere in the ingredients, put it back on the shelf. You're buying a sponge. Second, you can do it yourself. It's not as difficult as you think. You need 3 things: salt, time, and patience. Start with a pork belly. Weigh it. Use 2% of that weight in salt. So for a 5-pound belly, that's about 3 ounces of salt. Mix the salt with a small amount of curing salt, also called pink salt or Prague powder number 1. This contains sodium nitrite and prevents botulism. You can buy it online. It's not optional if you're curing at home. Rub the salt mixture over each surface of the meat. Place it in a non-reactive container, such as glass or food-grade plastic. Put it in your refrigerator. Every 2 days, turn it over and drain any liquid that accumulates. After 7 days, rinse the meat under cold water and pat dry with paper towels. Now let it dry. Wrap it in cheesecloth and hang it in a cool, dry place. A cellar, a spare refrigerator with the door ajar, anywhere between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Leave it hanging for 2 to 4 weeks. The meat will lose 15 to 20% of its weight. It will become firm. The fat will become slightly translucent. If you want to smoke it, cold smoke it for 8 to 12 hours using hardwood such as oak or hickory. Keep the temperature below 80 degrees. When ready, the bacon will be tough, dark, and nothing like supermarket bacon. It will last for months in your refrigerator or weeks at room temperature if kept dry. Slice thinly. The flavor is intense, salty, smoky, concentrated. That's what bacon was for 1,000 years before we decided to add water and call it progress. Third, learn to identify the frauds. If your bacon leaks white liquid when you cook it, it's been injected. If it shrinks more than 10% in the pan, it's been pumped with water. If it says uncured but lists celery powder, it still has nitrites. You're being tricked with a vegetable. The medieval farmer with his smokehouse was not primitive. He was an engineer who understood that food is chemistry. He knew that water is the enemy of preservation. He knew that smoke is medicine. He knew that time, not shortcuts, creates security. We forgot that. We traded its fortress for a cold chain and called it an improvement. But when the power goes out, when the trucks stop running, when the store shelves empty, your bacon would still be hanging in the cellar, safe and sound. Yours would be rotting in a plastic bag. If this content is opening your eyes to truths the industry prefers to keep hidden, now is the time to join this community. Hit the subscribe button, because every person who joins us is another voice demanding transparency and real quality. Leave a comment sharing your experience with supermarket bacon, or tell us if you've ever tried traditional preservation methods, and that like button. It not only shows you appreciated this documentary, it helps others discover this vital information that has been deliberately buried under decades of corporate marketing. Together, we are unearthing ancestral knowledge that should never have been forgotten. The secret to durable meat isn't in a laboratory or a factory. It's in the salt, the smoke, and the patience to let the chemistry do its work. Medieval bacon was food designed to survive. Yours was designed to sell. The choice is yours.